Our desire in this series is to hope that you would become better followers of Christ. And it's not just a marching order. Don't think of it that way. I promise you that when you become a better disciple, you'll become closer to Jesus. You'll experience more of him. So as we talk about these things that you can do to become a disciple, think of it that way. It's going to enhance your relationship with Jesus. So try some of these things that we talk about. I'm sure you'll prove it to be true. I want to answer this simple question that sometimes becomes so complicated, but who is a disciple? There's a few other questions I want to answer, and that is, what does a disciple do? And how do I become one? A disciple is simply this. A disciple is an ambassador of Jesus Christ. And you're like, oh, you already lost me right there. Well, let me tell you what an ambassador is. It's an official representative of Jesus. It could be an official representative of our country, official representative of somebody in a higher level of leadership. In our case, it is an official. We are official representatives of Jesus Christ. We've accepted him into our life. His blood has cleansed us from sin. It flows in our veins. It makes it official. We are ambassadors of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 20 says, therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ. God making his appeal through us. That's how he chooses to do it. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. If you want to grow into a full-on disciple of Jesus, then I'm going to give you 3 simple steps to try to understand this process and what you should do in your relationship with Jesus to become a full-on disciple of him. You can be a believer, but not a disciple. You can be a believer. You can be a believer, but not a disciple. You can know a lot about the Bible. You can read it, you can learn, you can be educated, but still not be a disciple. You can know a lot about cooking, but not be a chef. I learned the other day that I'm a cook, not a chef. But I'm only a cook at breakfast time. Pancakes, it's easy. You can know a lot about football. You can know stats, you can know all kinds of things, but you may not be a football player. You can know a lot about basketball, but not be a player. And as Mario already said, I want to congratulate Spring Mills for winning their first state championship. I'm so proud of them. I'm a Hedgesville boy, but I'm rooting for whoever's winning. If you got a chance to go to the state championship, that's who I'm rooting for. Anybody from our area, Martinsburg, Hedgesville. We got schools all over the place. I'm rooting for all of you. But I just thought that was pretty exciting because we've got several players that are in our church. And so I was just really proud of them. See, you can put on the uniform, but you might be sitting on the bench. You can go to church, but you may not be a disciple. You can worship, and that's part of becoming a disciple, but you can worship and still not be a disciple. I want to give you 3 steps that will take you to becoming a full-on disciple. Write this down. Number 1, you have to be a learner. This is the first step to becoming a disciple. You are a learner. Number 2, you are a follower. You can be a learner and not a follower. You can. You can be a learner and not a follower. You can be a follower and not a messenger. Because number 3 is a messenger. So these are the 3 things. These are the 3 steps, the 3 processes, the 3 roles. Call them what you want, but you got to be a learner. Once you learn, then you become a follower. And then once you become a follower, you will turn into being a messenger. They go in this order. And this determines our devotion in our relationship with Jesus Christ. Worship alone does not determine our devotion. You can be a worshiper, but not devoted to Jesus. You might be devoted to worship. Some of you might be devoted to worship because it sounds good. She sings good. Boy, we got some singers here at church. Man, we back there talking about all our favorites, and Kara would sing, that's our favorite. And Aisha would sing, that's our favorite. The next one would sing, that's our favorite. We just got lots of favorites. I mean, you can worship because it just sounds good. But that does not determine your devotion in your relationship with Jesus. A learner, a follower, a messenger determines our devotion to Jesus. Because ultimately what Jesus wants out of those that learn about him and those that follow him and those that are messengers of him is that we get more followers. Go make disciples. That is the end result of these 3 things. So I'm going to spend a little extra time on this first step because it's just so important. So today, I want to give you credit because you devoted your time to come into church to worship the Lord and to learn. Now, you could have just worshiped at home with no devotion. But you devoted your time to come to church. You devoted your time to get the kids ready. You devoted your time to drive. You devoted your time to get ready to go to church, to worship and learn about Jesus. Good on you. But without coming, and if worship was just the convenience of staying home, I don't think you could really call it worship. When what Jesus is doing in his church is the most important thing in the world. Now, Jesus wants to do good things at your home, but it'll be church first, and then you take that stuff into your home. Not in the absence of going to church. Now, you see, to become a learner, I have to talk about these things. This won't be the nicest message you'll ever hear. Church is important. The devil had his heyday during COVID, and we just didn't lollygag past it. No, preachers just kept standing up and saying, it's important to be in the presence of God. It's important for us to be together. Too many people slipped into the mindset of thinking, well, you just don't have to go to church. You know what? You don't have to go to church to be a believer. But if you want to be devoted to Jesus, if you want to be a follower of Jesus, you follow him where he goes. You will love what he loves. You will sacrifice yourself for things that he sacrificed himself for. You will love the church. You will get ready. You will go to it. You'll be part of it. You'll serve in it. You'll pray for it. You will think church all day long. You will champion and cheer on your home church. And until we learn to do that, you'll never be a follower of Christ. You might be a believer, but not a follower. Because following, you got to learn something about Jesus before you can even be a follower. Or you might end up following the wrong things. You might even get into the wrong church. It may not even be a church, but you got church written up there. It sounds like church. It looks like church. People dress like church, and you find out that you just got yourself into a whole bunch of heresy. It's out there. People get into these places. So you got to be a learner in order to be a follower. I'm going to really spend some time on this learning one. It's so important because we have to be part of this step. Of Matthew 11, verse 29, it says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Do you know why some people don't end up coming to church? It's because they're exhausted. They're tired. Their week has been so heavy. And it would just be so good to sleep in on Sunday morning and say, well, I'll just turn YouTube on. And the enemy gets us into that mode. Now, if you can't be here, thank God we have YouTube. If you're traveling or if you're, and you still love your church and you're watching on YouTube, that's fantastic. But if you're watching on YouTube in absence of not going to church, then the devil has you deceived. Because I want to tell you that when you start taking his yoke upon you, loving what he loves, talking about his church. When you take that yoke upon you and you devote yourself to the church of Jesus Christ, where he is winning souls into the kingdom through his church and through his followers, he said, I'll give you rest. And we think rest is an extra hour and a half of sleep or an extra hour of sleep. That's all it would have taken to go to church. Extra hour of sleep. So you might get rest, you might get some Z's, but you're not going to get any J's. That's not even in my notes, was it, guys? There. Our devotion to learning is the foundation to becoming a disciple. We have to learn. If we lose this step, we could be deceived to believe that discipleship is something that it isn't. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 3, it says, Paul is talking about how simple these steps are to becoming a disciple. And he says this, but I'm afraid that just as Eve was deceived by the serpent's cunning, your minds may somehow be led astray from your sincere and pure devotion to Christ. He said, that's what he's saying. I'm afraid that you might take the simplest things that brings rest to your soul, strength to your life, guidance for you to live in a way that you can bring about such peace and the presence of God with you everywhere that you go. I'm afraid that your mind might slip into something else and think you're going to find rest somewhere else. Or you might think of discipleship as something that it isn't, because really what discipleship is, Paul says, it's sincere and pure devotion to Christ. That's it. Sincere. Just be sincere about it. Sincere and pure devotion to Christ. So he just fears that our minds might be led astray. But worship and word, like we are getting here this morning, they're fundamental to the learning process and our relationship with Jesus. The purpose of learning is to keep your relationship with Jesus on fire. Listen to this statement: discipleship is more relational than educational. Now, this is where Paul fears that some minds might slip into, because the Pharisees were really educated. And Jesus came up to him, he's like, man, you guys, you're so smart. You know the law, frontwards and backwards, but you miss almost everything. Because discipleship is more relational than educational. Now, if you throw out the education, you'd just be a dummy Christian. So you need to learn. We need to learn. But it is more relational than educational. If we said this, it would be a true statement. I want to educate myself in the Word of God so that I can be closer to Jesus. But the enemy would just love to cause your mind to slip from the simplicity of your devotion, of your relationship with Jesus. Number two, we become a follower. So we learn, and then we take what we learn and we begin to follow. Once you learn about Jesus, you start putting that into practice. And when your words and accusations, when your words and actions, some of you, yes, sometimes we get into accusations, but actions represent the Father's heart. That's when we become a follower. Are your actions and the way that you walk, the way that you talk, matching up with the Father's heart? Are you following Jesus' instructions? Step one. Are you obedient to what you have learned? It's not up to the teacher. It's not up to me to make you obedient. I can't do that. That's up to you. You decide to become obedient. I remember one time this was like 25 years ago, I used to train in airplanes, sport planes, and I had this one guy. He was a rather large fellow, and I really liked him. He just was always cracking jokes and everything all the time. And I would tell him when he'd get in the plane, I'd say, now, all jokes aside, you really need to listen to me. Because that's how he would take flight. You know, teachers learn this, that sometimes people will laugh and they just become absent of the things that you're saying to them. And sometimes maybe they're telling jokes, or maybe they just start crying, or, you know. And so this guy, he would just always tell jokes. And I would just tell him, no jokes in the plane. You now need to listen to the teacher. And I'll never forget the first time I told him, I said, don't touch the stick, don't touch anything. I want you to just watch. I'm not even going to tell you anything. I just want you to watch and see what I'm doing. And so I came in, I did a couple of landings, went around. He started to ask me questions. I said, don't ask questions, just watch. Just watch. And so on the third time I told him, I said, I'm going to talk you through it. And so I'm coming in for a landing, and I'm like, okay, I'm slowing the plane down. I got the throttle off. Now I can just glide in. I'm coming in over the fence, and so you just let it glide, keep that airspeed up. And now I'm approaching the ground within 10 feet, pull back, pull back, pull back, pull back. Oh, that was a nice landing. And he says, I got it. I got it. I got it. And so we come around. He had it all right. we're coming in for a landing, and I'm helping him just a little bit. And I'm like, no, keep the throttle up right now. No, do this. He says, no, I got it. And then he gets within 10 feet of the ground with the throttle off. And he said, pull back. And he yanked back on the stick. Like I said, he was all bigger than me. And he was stronger than me. And so the first thing that I do is I give it full throttle as the plane is going straight up, getting ready to stall and turn over into the ground. And I am pushing the stick forward, but I'm like, I'm going to break it. I know I'm going to break it. And so instinctively, I thought of what my instructor told me one time. He said, there'll come a day when someone will have a death grip on that stick. And he said, you got to throat punch them. And you got to do it fast. I laugh too, until you're in the situation. And it was no laughing matter. I did not know if I was going to recover that aircraft. And so I'm trying to push the stick forward, realize I can't. I'm full throttle, and I'm like, I'm not going to throat punch him. So I just hit him in the chest, but I must have swung really hard, because it went up his chest and caught him right there in the bottom of the chin, and it just stunned him. And so he was just, and I let him know, hey, it was a pretty good landing. He's like, what happened? Why'd you hit me? I said, you're about ready to kill me. All I did was hit you. I said all that to say it's important to listen to your teacher if they know what they're talking about. And if you don't think they know what they're talking about, just don't get back in the plane. But it is important to have a teacher to tell you things that you might not be doing correctly that could put your own life in danger, put your own marriage in danger, put your children in danger. And you know what? Not everybody wants a teacher. And this is why people don't become disciples. They can't get past the first step. They don't want a teacher. And so my hope is today is that when we talk about the things that we can do to follow Jesus, is that you would listen to your teachers. Mario spoke an incredible message last week on discipleship. He'd give him a big hand. I was just so proud of him on that message. And I thought, man, now we all know Beth is the most amazing teacher we have, hands down. But Mario, I was like, he's a close second. You know where that puts me. Somebody's got to bring up the tail end. But we need to listen to our teacher. And so I've never had to do that to my staff, though. I've never had to throat punch any one of them. But when all else fails, that's what's coming. Because I care. No, I wouldn't. A follower. Number 3, once you become a follower, then you become a messenger. Now, this is the most powerful step of the process of becoming a disciple. You want to get to this place where you are a messenger, because there's certain things reserved for the messenger phase, for the messenger level, okay? It is the most powerful step. This is where lives are changed. This is where people are healed. This is where demons are cast out. This is where great and mighty signs and wonders happen in the church. Now, I'm going to tell you this. If you're not a disciple, you ain't laying your hands on me. You know these people that stand up here? All we do, we vet them, we watch them, and we honor their lives and how they walk with Jesus. Not just how they pray. I mean, there's a lot of people that can pray that still may not be a disciple, a full-on disciple. These are full-on disciples. Get around people that are full-on disciples. And if you're not sure, be careful who you let lay their hands on you. You want a full-on disciple. Why? Because when people get to this level of the messenger phase, that they're not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, there are signs and wonders that follow them. This is the level that we all should desire to get into. Mark chapter 16 and verse 20, it says, and the disciples went everywhere and they preached, and the Lord worked through them, confirming what they said by many miraculous signs. Signs will follow you. Signs will follow you. You know what? One day these prayer warriors up here, one day they're going to, listen, they don't know everything that's going on from the results of their prayer, but one day they're going to get in heaven, and in detail, I believe Jesus is going to let them know. Because the Bible says that when we get to heaven, we're going to have his mind. We're going to see him and know him as he is. So we're going to have the mind of Jesus, and we're going to know, we're going to start to learn all the great things that have happened as we follow Jesus. Where do I start in becoming a messenger? You can be a messenger if you're a mom or dad. Now, in the youth today, they call them influencers, YouTube influencers. But if you're a Christ influencer, all you have to do is have one friend, and you can be a disciple. Cast the right message to that one friend. You're a full-on disciple. Get ready. Some great things are about to happen. Jesus' power is about ready to be released. You were scared to death, but you went ahead and sent that text anyway. You were afraid that somebody would ask you to pray, and you weren't really ready for praying yet audibly, but you sent that email. You spent 2 hours writing out a prayer that was 3 lines long. Good for you. That's a disciple. And you sent it. You sat there and he was like, and then you hit send. You were afraid the whole time that they might meet up with you and say, okay, can you pray that same prayer in front of everybody else? Well, I'm going to tell you what, if that ever happens, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and there's going to be a power of heaven that will fall. God will keep opening doors for his power and his mighty signs and wonders to flow through you. Josh's dad, Dan Jordan, I used to sing with him and my sister all the time. He's my brother-in-law, and he's a pastor. And I thought, man, the one thing that I could do that he could do was play the trumpet. And I loved how he played trumpet. And I was like, anytime he was playing, I wanted to get mine out. And so we could play trumpet together. But he also sang, and I never sang, so I didn't think I could do that. And until he kind of nudged me along, come on, sing with us, we'll be a trio. And so I used to travel around with them, and we sang at all kinds of churches while I was in high school there at the Christian school, Higgins, and they were going to faith school of theology, and we just traveled everywhere. But the thing that I always thought about was preaching. It's like, but the one thing I can't do is preach. But here's the thing. I never stopped traveling. I never stopped being around preaching. I never stopped listening to Dan. And just all of a sudden, one day, I said, I've got a message to speak. And I started preaching, and I haven't stopped. When you get around a good teacher, and you stay around it, all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit will take you from learning to following to being a messenger. You have no idea how many people you are influencing in your life. Becoming a full-on disciple of Jesus, I'm telling you, is what gets the best results in life, in what Jesus is doing in the earth. And he says, go and make disciples.